Okay, so for today, I'm going to go over some sort of commentary regarding principles. So, if you recall, the architectural elements, you know that there are six of them, right? So, at the business level, you have the drivers, the goals, the metrics, and then when you drill down to the other architectural elements, you have your principles, models, standards, right? So we'll talk about principles. So this is, uh, I would say, in the whole of architecture, uh, if you are unable to really master the skill in understanding or even crafting principles, your your architecture can be flimsy. Okay, it can be full of holes like Swiss cheese, right? And it's not going to be a very reliable architecture for as basis for any of the IT projects that you intend to implement with your company. So let's start with principles. Now, a principle is a fundamental approach or means for achieving a goal. Okay, uh, and this is a little bit challenging because it's not supposed to be super detailed, right? Especially if you're dealing with principles of the other views, the higher views, like the business view, the technical view, okay? They're not really supposed to be very, very detailed, but they should have enough information to tell me or tell you or tell any reader on what the approach or means is necessary to achieve a goal. Now, if you've noticed, there is a connection with another architectural element, which is goals, right? So you know that prior to principles, we've talked about drivers, goals, and metrics. So the connection between principle and goal is pretty much established at the start. Your principle has to be in the service of something, it has to achieve a goal. And the thing here is that a principle is timeless, meaning it is not bound by a specific time or that it is going to be relevant from this date to that date. Okay, so in a way, the principle is, in that manner, timeless. It is not going to be dependent on a certain schedule. Okay, now, as you know, principles constrain and inform decisions about the solution and its realization. Well, that's because your principles are supposed to work towards a goal. Okay, and principles provide an agreed reference framework for the evaluation of alternatives and decisions. So when you're looking at possible projects, the role of principles is that they're like criteria that you can overlay on top of any proposal. And if the proposal doesn't really match the principle, then you don't do it. So that's the scheme. That's the idea behind principles. Okay, and definitely, as we've alluded to at the start, okay, stakeholders are key in defining effective principles. Now, here are examples and non-examples of principles. Okay, and we can go through each one. No? But you've already have taken a look at some of the examples of principles. Maybe let's look at the non-examples or statements that are not considered as principles. Okay, so if we take a look at the first non-example, give our customers what they want. Okay, um, well, it's not a principle for one because it doesn't really tell us the means or the approach to actually attack a goal. You don't even know what the goal is. Maybe your desire is to give our customers what they want, but how do you measure that, right? And as we said earlier about goals, I mean goals have to be measurable as well. So in this regard, the statement "give our customers what they want." Okay, it's not a principle. Maybe it's the seed to a goal, or maybe it's just even a simple driver. But it's not a principle because it doesn't really tell us a specific idea, at least, on how to achieve a goal. Okay. Okay. The second non-example here is response times must be less than 10 seconds. Okay. Well, this is more of a metric. You know that the response time has to be less than 10 seconds, but it doesn't tell you how. How are you going to achieve that? So it doesn't tell you. So therefore, it's not a principle. Now we go back to the examples. So examples in the first point here, we provide web shopping as an additional channel to market. Okay, you don't really have the nitty gritty details yet, but you have a general idea, fundamental. Okay, we use middleware to integrate web-based order taking into our existing systems. Okay, middleware. Use middleware. The purpose is to integrate order taking, okay, or gathering of orders, maybe from customers or from suppliers. Okay, doesn't tell you the details how it's going to be done, but you know more or less what's going to happen. Okay, our website allows customers to place credit card orders securely. Okay, you have some idea there.
Mm-hmm.
You want that there's going to be credit cards
Yeah.
facility for your website. Another example of a principle, we have a formal documented process for product selection based on predefined and agreed criteria. Okay, so you have some ideas on how to implement it. Okay, that you will have a documented process, a formal process. So when you compare these two sets, you'll notice more or less the deficiency or the defect of the non-examples. Okay, and it goes back to the definition of what a principle is. A principle is supposed to tell you in general terms on how you're going to attack a goal or how you're going to intend to achieve the goal, right? Now, principles are requirements for requirements. So, in other words, uh, they sort of put more details on what your general desires would be. So, so that's why it's called requirements for requirements, right? Um, you know, you have more or less a goal. For you to be able to accomplish your goals, the principles are next. So if you look at it in a hierarchy of importance, so to speak. So at the top would be your goals. In order for you to achieve your goals, go one layer down, those would be your principles. So when you go bottom up, in order for you to achieve your goals, you need to be able to establish the principles first. You need to be able to demonstrate that whatever it is that you do, okay, it's consistent with the principles that we've laid out. So in this case, it's specific means, the guidelines, the strategies, they're principles. And they must be developed before the solution can be designed. So sometimes people try to reverse engineer the process by thinking that, okay, I have a solution. I want to implement this solution, but they haven't really thought of why. Why should I implement that solution? What principle do I fulfill? And as you know, the principles are approaches to achieve the goal. So you see the connection. Um, you have a goal, you more or less have a solution. Okay. But even before you think about the solution, okay, you have to understand, okay, in order for me to achieve this goal, which is important, I need to have some sort of guidelines. Okay, how can I say that I've accomplished this goal? What would be the means that's acceptable to me to accomplish this goal? Now, take note that goals can be accomplished or can be approached in many ways. Okay, principles provide the specification. Okay, they narrow down your possibilities. So, if a goal can be accomplished maybe in 100 ways, well, for you, you're probably going to look at maybe one or two or three. You don't have to go through all 100. That's the role of goal. Sorry, that's the role of principles. Okay. And because you've narrowed it down, now it allows the architecture team to test requirements. So for necessity and sufficiency. Now, okay, so those are the principles. Okay, then when people start doing their things, whenever they develop or maybe they'll consider a product that they can buy and install, well, you have to ask yourselves, okay, if they were to implement into the company, do you think it would help them achieve their goals? Okay, how would you know if they're able to achieve their goals? Well, you take a look at the principles. Does the solution match or is inconsistency with the principles? Okay, now you have an idea. Okay, now requirements may have been specified before principles were available. Okay, that's quite possible, and may also be generated as the solution architecture is being developed. Okay, but this is really more okay. I mean, the practical reality there is that people don't come up with an architecture plan from the very beginning. Maybe they've been used to the perhaps the traditional way of doing solution uh, analysis, okay, or typically of what you do in a typical IT project. You know, you go through the requirements straight up, no, then you follow a certain methodology, and then you try to implement it. Okay, but the thing there is that because architecture is supposed to be more encompassing, it's supposed to take a look at the larger things. Then the requirements may not have considered the fact that there has to be an architecture. Okay, but that's possible. You can remedy that. Okay, requirements that do not link back to principles probably do not contribute to the solution. So maybe those who've come up with a list of requirements, and you will see this in a lot of companies, no, when they request for proposals, they do RFPs, request for proposals, they do a list of requirements. Sometimes those lists of requirements do not really link back to a potential principle or any principle for that matter. And because it doesn't link back to a principle, you're not even sure whether that's going to help them achieve their goals. Maybe those requirements, they just pluck it out of the air. Maybe they've read something online, sounds fancy, sounds cool. Okay, why don't we use it? Okay, or why don't we put that down as a list, as a requirement? Okay, but they've never really thought of the reasons why that is important to them. Okay, and principles that do not generate any requirements suggest that necessary requirements may have been overlooked. Okay, so if principles don't really give you a lot of idea on what is really required specifically, then maybe you need to revisit your principle. Maybe it's still broad. But remember, principles need not be super specific. Okay. It should just be enough to tell you how I can achieve my goal. Okay, and as you may have seen in the presentations in the slide deck in the materials later on, you will see that there is a cascading effect. That you will see that the principles actually relate to other principles in different views. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a while. Okay, so how do you derive your principles? Where there are more um, three areas, three possible sources: business values and strategy, IT values and strategy, and the project's business need. Okay, and this would be your typical sources. So at the intersection of these three would be where you can get your principles. So it's not just simply going to be business only or IT only. Okay, it has to be the merging of both. As we said earlier, architecture is like the bridge that connects IT and business, and at the heart of it would be your principles. Now, what could be sources of principles? Customer material, so their company reports, whatever is placed in their websites, strategy documents, business cases, project documentation. You can try to derive what those principles are from these materials. And a lot of these materials are publicly available, so they're not really confidential, so to speak. They're very much accessible, and it can be analyzed and interpreted by many people. Okay. But naturally, you do not simply just limit yourselves to these things. You are also tasked to do interviews and the like. So that's something that you'll eventually learn in consulting. But it's a good start to formulate your principles. These customer materials. Now, other potential sources would be the culture of the organization. So, what are the customers' values? Now, some companies would place their core values somewhere in a wall, or maybe there's a specific area in their website perhaps that really lays down their core values. Okay, gives you an idea on what's important to them or what's really valuable to them, right? So what they believe in. And it might be good to think of it in terms of a spectrum sometimes. So, for example, in terms of information, are they open or closed? Do they like to share information, or are they a little bit restrictive in that area? What about risk? Are they risk averse or are they risk takers? What's the culture? What about technology? Are they the types to do they have appetite for new technology that came out yesterday? Or are they the type that, unless it's been proven, a lot of customers have validated the technology, then that's the only time I use it. Okay. Or in terms of development, are they the type that, okay, we don't have a lot of people, so we might outsource or buy the product? Or are they the types that, we take pride with our people, we might as well do it in-house or build it on our own organically? Okay. And even the organization, in terms of their decision making, are they decentralized when it comes to decision making, or are they centralized, very bureaucratic? Okay. Nothing wrong with that. But there are differences. Okay. And these could be also your sources for principles. So that's the idea of principles. Now let's talk about rationales, implications, obstacles, and actions. So these are attributes of a principle. So you have the principle statement. Okay. But every principle statement, there was going to be a rationale and the implication. Okay, for that. And then you talk about obstacles, potential obstacles, and the actions to be done. Okay. Now, what is a rationale? The rationale is the motivation behind the principle. Okay, the business benefit of achieving the principle or the cost business impact of not achieving it. Your rationale is supposed to point to a driver if it's a business principle. Okay, if it is a later principle, like it's a functional principle or it's a technical principle, it should link back to something from a principle of the higher view. So if it's a technical principle, it should link back to some functional principle. Okay. In fact, that functional principle would have implications, obstacles, and actions that would then funnel to the technical principle. Okay. Now, for the business principle, okay, the rationale should tie up to a business driver. And as we said earlier, there are many types of business driver. It can be based on regulation, it can be based on an opportunity, okay? It can be based on a fear of losing something. Okay? So those are your usual sources for rationale. Now, implications, okay, it's an explicit statement of work or conditions needed to achieve these principles. So this is the where the specifics start to come in. So in order for this principle to happen, the question that you want to answer is what must be done to implement the principle? So if I were to make sure that this principle becomes true, what do I need to do? Okay? Or what should happen? What should happen in terms of IT, but not only in IT, in terms of process, in terms of people. What about obstacles? Okay, obstacles, these are known issues, problems, constraints that may impede with the achievement of this principle. So the question that you want to answer is what can get in the way of progress in achieving the principle to be true? Okay. So with these two elements in mind, these two attributes, rather, the implications and the obstacles, then you derive your actions. So these are specific tasks to address an obstacle or to carry out an implication of a principle. So typically the what, the when, the who, that's when you start to put in the more details. So now your principle, it's a principle statement. But then when you start to unpack it, then you have these four things. Okay, your rationale, your implications, your obstacles, and your actions. Okay. Take note that these four uh, are not part of your principal statement. So these are going to be separate statements that will support your principal statement. But your principal statement would be standalone. Okay, it should tell you a generalized idea on how you want to achieve a goal. That's the principle. Okay, so if you look at it from this perspective, the principle is some sort of an agreement between you and the client and everybody else. Everybody agrees, okay, this is how we want to achieve our goal. Okay. And the reason why that is so is because of the rationale, which typically links it to a particular business idea. Okay. A business framework. And then when you look at implications and obstacles, implications would be the explicit statement of work. Your obstacles would be the risks that could get in your way. So when you combine all of them together, okay, then your implication, or sorry, your conclusion should be a set of actions that you need to do. And because these are actions, okay, it's been clear, then it will drive behavior, then can drive changes. So here are examples of principles, okay, at a per view basis. Okay, so for example, the principle statement at the business view is this: our business is run as a customer-driven business. Okay, uh, it's a principle. Later on, you'll find out. You'll ask yourself whether this is a good principle, or you can improve on it. Okay, so that's subject for later. But if you ask the general litmus test, is this statement able to answer the question, how do we approach in achieving a goal? Well, okay, it gives us some idea. Okay, now you want to be customer driven, for whatever that means. You'll have to unpack it later on, maybe in your other views. Okay, so an example of a functional principle, which is supposed to help support the business principle here in this case, is we provide a single integrated view of all customer data to anyone in the organization or external who legitimately requires it. Okay, so in order for you to support the business principle being a customer driven business, you need to have a single integrated view of customer data. But that's not the only functional principle you can think of. There could be other functional principles, okay, that would help support your business principle. And remember, that's not the only business principle you might have. Depending on your drivers and goals, you can have many principles at the business view. Now, what about your technical view? What's an example of a principle there? We use a combination of database and messaging middleware to integrate web-based and back-end legacy systems. Okay. So now this technical principle is in support of the functional principle with a single integrated view. And then with the implementation principle, so now, okay, you have something more specific. The single view of customer is provided initially to web customers and will then be extended to existing non-web customers. Okay. So those are examples of your business, of your principles in general: the business, the functional, the technical, and implementation. So here's an example of a business view principle, but we add the other attributes. So at the business view, here's your principle. We provide web shopping as an additional direct channel to market. Okay, that seems like a good principle. It answers the question on how we can achieve a goal at the business level. Okay. Okay, we provide web shopping. Okay, that's clear enough. So what are the attributes? Okay, what's the rationale? Okay, allowing customers to place orders on the web reduces order processing time. Of course, this is in reference to manual or to paper-based. Another potential rationale in this case, in this example, our competition already has this capability. Okay. Now, implication. So now, in order for the principle to be true, what should happen? So the implication here is that this requires modification of the current IT infrastructure. Okay, so you start to see the relevance of implications. Okay, so in order for you to make your principle true, okay, this is what needs to happen. That's your implication. Now, what are your obstacles? Your obstacles: projected cost is beyond this year's budget, and it can conflict with existing distribution channels. I mean, that's a potential obstacle. Okay. Now, your obstacles typically refer to the risks related to the implications. So that's why both of them are connected. Now, given these two elements together, then you'll have a specific action in mind, which can be varied. Okay. Now, what about functional view? Okay, what's the example? The ABC Exchange website allows customers to place credit card orders securely. Okay, so what's the rationale? Customers will not place orders unless they have confidence that their credit card information is secure. So the principle here is that there's a level of security, okay, or there should be some security features in your solution. So that's the functional view. Okay, and why is so? What's the implication? Now, if you want to implement this principle, what do you need? Okay, well, you need the required technology to accomplish security. And a potential obstacle in this case would be lack of security expertise in the current workforce. Okay, technical view. We use middleware to integrate web-based order into our existing systems. Okay, so the rationale, the web is the extension of our channels to market and is integrated in our existing business model. Okay, so what are the implications? Well, we need to develop or outsource applications to integrate new with existing customers, okay, new customers, existing customers. And another implication is that we need to investigate middleware alternatives. Maybe in this example, they don't know what middleware is, what needs to be done. And then obstacles, what are the expected risks? Well, compatibility or integration issues. Okay, if we're partnering or merging with an existing solution, perhaps. And here in this case, another shout out, okay, on the lack of internal expertise. So maybe they don't have people who know how to use middleware. Okay, the implementation view. Okay, so how do you implement? Okay, what's the principle? We have a formal documented process for product selection based on predefined and agreed criteria. So without this, okay, anarchy will only get worse. Should improve product supplier discounts and lower costs of product maintenance. Okay. What are the implications here? Well, in order for this to happen, well, you need to define process and selection criteria, maybe ongoing review, and then communicate the new process. Okay, so this is what's needed in order for this principle to happen. Now, what are the risks? What's perceived to be obstacles here? Well, resistance to perceived control and the lack of support for the ongoing process. I mean, that's a potential risk in order for the principle to come true. And principles relate the views. So if you've noticed, okay, your business drivers, your business goals, if you can see it at your left side, right, they fuel your business principles. They give you ideas, they give you material in order to craft your business principles. Okay. And also based on your business principles, with the business drivers and business goals, this would help populate your other attributes such as rationale, implications, obstacles, and actions. So it's there. It's supposed to expand your idea of principles. But if you've noticed, these four views are connected. Your functional principles now would be based on business principles. And then it would have its own set of attributes, rational, implication, obstacles, and actions. And then concurrently with technical principles and with implementation principles. You've noticed that the other architecture elements are still depicted here, but we'll talk about that at a different module. So you have your models and your standards. Okay, so later on, they will also be populated. Now, principles relate the views. Here's an example. So for example, if your driver is competition is outstripping us on delivery. So that's the driver. Now your goal is to improve time to market. So a business principle in order to achieve this goal, improve time to market, might be, okay, we offer e-commerce. So that's the principle. Okay. Why is it that we need to offer e-commerce? Well, the rationale here is it reduces order processing time, okay? Modify the IT structure. Okay, so that's the implication. Okay, now, in order for us to implement e-commerce, now we have to modify IT structure. Okay, the obstacle might be beyond the year's budget. So the action is to survey customers. Okay, would they prefer e-commerce or would they prefer to do it the old way of doing it? And remember, if you've taken a look at all these things from the business view, they're all tied to that vision of achieving the goal, which is improving time to market. Okay. Now we go on to the functional view. So that's the business principle. Okay, we need to offer e-commerce capability. Okay, let's drill it down further. What are the needed features? Okay, the needed features. Okay, it's not clear here. No, so our customers can browse, check inventory, order, and everything else related to customers. Okay, why is that? Well, it's needed for e-commerce. Okay, so now you see here the rationale for the functional principle is actually based on the business principle. Okay, and then you have all the other attributes. Then later on, your technical principles. We use scripts database to check inventory validity. Take a look at the rationale. The rationale, customer checks inventory, makes valid orders. Okay, that's in relation to the functional principle earlier. Okay, so now you can see the interconnectedness of the principles, and they relate the views, all four. So again, just to put things in a 10,000-foot view, principle, which is our current topic, it's at the heart of it. But notice that your principal will need to borrow or leverage a lot of the material from your drivers and goals. Okay. But other sources of principles can come from your culture, from the materials of the customers. And these two would actually help relate or explain better the drivers and the goals of the business. Okay, so they're not really disjointed, even if in this diagram they seem to be separate, but actually they're both connected. Okay, and that your rationale, in the case especially of the business principle, they will always tie back to your drivers and goals, and then it follows a straight line, so to speak. So logically, you'll have implications. Okay, so you know, okay, if this principle needs to happen, what do I need to do? Or what is needed? What are the implications? What are the obstacles to achieve that? So what's going to be my task? What are the actions to be done? Okay. Now and here, okay, so here's the connection. Okay, your rational. Okay, now so you notice your rational will also tie back to your drivers and goals. Okay, and notice here that the obstacles can actually be your material for a principle, for another principle in a different view. Okay, and regardless of the view, okay, other sources of the principles can be from the culture and the material of the customers. Okay. Now, implications and obstacles may require the revisit of principles. So as you're doing it, and this is what makes it exciting, I suppose. But yeah, there's going to be effort. But what really makes it exciting is that it's never a one-shot deal, right? It's not as if I write down my principles and then that's it. Now, just like in any other writing assignment or writing effort, there will be many versions or many drafts, so to speak. So once you start writing down your implications and obstacles, okay, then you start to think, okay, this is what needs to happen in order for my principle to get done. And these are the risks that I foresee that can derail my principles from becoming true. But there doesn't seem to be any consistency with the other principles. So now you have to rewrite your principles. So remember, principles are not one shot deals. No, I mean they have to be written the first time around so that you have an idea. But then you may have to rewrite your principles. You may need to improve on it. Okay. And as alluded earlier, okay, there is a separate discussion on improving principles. Okay. There are good principles. Okay. They're a good start. But you know that you can still improve on it. Okay. So that's how it is. That's how principles work. And if you can see all these arrows linking to one another and all that, okay, so you can see that Okay, the implications and obstacles on the previous view actually help give material or give shape to the later principles, right? Whereas the functional, oh sorry, the rationale rather of the principles would be based on the previous views principles. So you can see the connection here, okay? And definitely the implications and obstacles lead to actions that need to be done. Okay. And your principles, all of them will actually define your choice of models and standards that you intend to use. So now we go to the part on actions. We've talked about rational, we've talked about implications, obstacles. Now we talk about action. It's not really complicated. You see, an action is an activity that is undertaken to make progress on an implication, remove an obstacle, or verify an assumption. Okay. Remember that in order for you to make the principle true, you cannot just simply stay at the level of assumption. You have to validate your assumptions, right? Because if in the validation process you realize that your assumption is wrong, you may need to change your principle. Okay? So the action is not necessarily geared towards making progress in an implication or removing an obstacle, both of which are related in making the principle true. You also need to validate whether, okay, the assumption surrounding the crafting of the principle, is it true? Or is it unfounded? Or has it changed? Okay, so, and if it has changed or if it's not true, then you have to change your principle. Okay, actions are quick results. Okay, so the actions are not projects in themselves. They should be tasks. Okay, actions are quick results for the customer, and they can point to follow-on business for us. Okay, it's critical to capture action items. Okay, either after each view or when all four views have been developed. So, okay, I mean, you don't really have to wait to complete everything, all the four views. I mean, you can do it already as you're crafting your view. And you need to agree on actions and capture what, who, owned by whom, and by when. So this is really task based. So if you look about tasks, you have to answer, okay, what's the task? Who should do it? And when should it be done? Very simple. Okay. And actions must be objectively conformable. There shouldn't be any gray areas. Okay, did you actually do this action? Or can we say this action is completed? Okay, there should be a clear criteria on when to say that the action has been done or not. In fact, I would even dare say it has to be binary. It's either it's done or it's not, right? There's no gray area in like, it's 70% or 50%. No. If it's 70 or 50%, it's not done, right? It has to be clear. Okay, so these are the actions to be done. Okay. It needs, it can be binary. Okay. Actions are the things that you must do to make the principle become truth. So it's a to-do list and it's necessary and sufficient. Okay. If you miss any of the actions, the principle will not happen. Okay. And there are no actions on the list that are not needed. So you don't have superfluous tasks like optional, like just because, right? I mean, there's no such thing as just because type of actions. Okay. They're there because your actions are supposed to address an implication or address an obstacle. Okay, because these implications and these obstacles are lined up to making sure that the principle is attainable or it becomes truth, no, in our parlance right now. So your examples of actions, well, they're not really. Yeah, you probably don't need to elaborate on this. I mean, you know that okay, this can be tasks, very simple tasks, as long as you're able to identify the person, the owner of the task, and when the task is supposed to be completed. Remember, actions are important. Okay? Especially at the level of principle, you don't just simply stick to just the rationale or the implication or the obstacle. Well, you need to put the actions also. Because in our much earlier slide, we said that actions drive behavior and then they come up with the output that we all would like to happen. So just a review. So this is again the diagram, their connections with one another. We've seen it. Okay. And we'll go to the last item on topic areas. So topic areas or subviews. So you have your general view, but then you can have subviews. The analogy here is that because a view can be so big, right? Business view. Wow. I mean, what are the things that you can consider in business view? So many, right? Maybe you'd like to talk about increasing your market, or want to talk about improving your cost structure, or you think about uh, maybe funding, let's say, additional business for new ventures. Okay, so but there are many. I mean, there are many. It's a broad area. Okay, it's a broad field business view, right? Okay, or even with the other views, you want to talk about functional view. You talk about, let's say, accounting. Okay, what about accounting? I mean, are you talking about payroll? Are you talking about general ledger? Are you talking about materials management? Are you talking about treasury? I mean, okay, even in themselves, they can be big, right? So accounting as a functional area, maybe that's something that can still be decomposed, right? Or chopped down further to manageable bits. And that's where topic areas come into the picture. So they're a way, that's not the only way, but a way to help you appreciate the views by having a conversation about the topic areas and then moving to another topic area and then moving to a topic area. And before you know it, you've already covered the entire view. So topic areas are areas that are important to the customer. So here in the case of solution architecture, because let's say the business view quite broad, but depending on what the drivers and goals are, maybe there are areas that you don't need to talk about. And therefore, these are things that probably do not need to have their own set of principles anymore. Okay, because it's quite well established, but you can still put them if you want to. Okay, there's nothing wrong there. But these are areas, topic areas, these are areas that are important to the customer. These are areas where having principles would help. I mean, by going into these topic areas, you'll have a better way of crafting your principles. And topic areas are natural affinity groupings for concerns within a view. I mean, related ideas, related concepts. Okay. So it says here, if we had complete clarity and consensus on these areas, we would be in excellent shape to proceed. Well, topic areas are really nothing more than guide rails, right? To help you try to gravitate your initial ideas when crafting a principle, but you're flexible in how you want to approach your topic areas. So each topic area represents an aspect of the enterprise where the architecture is going to change decision making and behavior. Okay, so this is a scope, your impact area, so to speak. Okay, they help in grouping principles and models. Okay, in analyzing the level of completeness in a given area. So if you have a set of topic areas and you try to craft your principles, later on you'd realize that certain topic areas may not have principles yet. So now you realize, well, hey, if a topic area is important to the customer and I have no principles there, I should be worried. I should put something there. Okay. And different views may or may not have the same topic area, so they can vary across views. And here's the practical suggestion. They should be small in number and agreed to by the customer. You can have topic areas like 20, 30. Okay, like I said, the business view can be very broad, but not all of them would be important to the customer. So just choose the ones that's really important to them. Okay, so develop a draft list, discuss and agree with the customer, and you can organize some sort of a workshop to communicate that. Okay, so just to set expectations. So here are some examples. I'm not going to go through one by one. Okay, but you can see that they're quite varied. Okay, so you can see that the ones in green are business related topics. The ones in light blue would be functional. The ones in dark blue, okay, Sorry, the ones in dark blue would be functional. The ones in light blue would be technical, and then the ones in beige would refer to implementation. So these are sample topic areas. Okay. Oh, there you have it. Okay, so they've aligned it. Okay. Okay. Just let you guys read this on your own. You have a copy of the slides, but okay. So these are sample topic areas. Okay. There are a lot. Okay, and you don't have to go through each one of them. Maybe just pick out the ones that are really important. Could just be one or two areas. Need not be many of them. Okay, and that's pretty much it on principles. Okay, are there any questions regarding principles?
Do you have a question?
Yeah, go.
For principles, are they like the purpose of the company or the business?
Purpose of the company. No. I mean, the purpose would probably be on the drivers,
Um,
right? Your principles. It's like you can consider it like the core value of the solution, right? If an organization would have core values, right? It has its own credo, so to speak. Then your architecture analogously, their core values would be the principles. So for a solution to really work, your core value has to be based on the principles that's written there. Um, yeah, they help explain it a little bit. So it's not really the purpose of the company. It's supposed to be ideas on how you'd be able to achieve your goal. Okay, so your goals are supposed to be the principles of the company, right? Or sorry, company, and your principles are supposed to help you achieve those goals. So they're more of a how than a what or a why. You know, purpose. When you talk about purpose, that's a why question, right? Principles are a how. They tell you the means or the approach on how you can actually achieve your goals. So that's the difference. I hope I made that clear. Did I catch your question?
okay, so sir, follow up.
Yeah.
For the discussion threads or discussions that you posted, do we have to incorporate, say, a goal into the principle that we want to put into, for example, the business principle?
Okay. Uh, on its own, the business principle, you can just write it in one sentence. And then maybe if you'd like to explain further why that is your principle, you can append it. You can add more explanation to it. But as a principle, it should just be just like one sentence, and it should stand alone. Why? Because your principle is, as we said earlier, it's supposed to be a how, a fundamental approach or fundamental means to achieve a goal. So naturally, if the approach is obvious in achieving a certain goal, then you probably don't need to explain what that goal is. But if you'd like to explain a little bit further, then yeah, you can add that. You can add that as further support to why you think that's a principle. No problem. You can do that.
So can we assume the principles for the workplace design?
You can assume the drivers or the goals,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but you don't assume the principles. You write it down,
No, sir,
right?
what I mean is like a theoretical, like um a principle. So it's not explicitly in the sample case that we have. So like somewhat additional.
I think that's the intention of the discussion board, right? You're supposed to say something that is not or indicated in the samples yet. Let me pull this up. So wait, let me. If you have no more questions about the commentary earlier in the lecture earlier, I'll stop the recording. Okay. So before I stop or before I go to the discussions to the assignment, Do you have any questions on the theory or on the concepts?
None for me
None.
po.
Wala, no, okay, so I'll stop recording.